Greetings and hello. Welcome to the ultimate Aztec guide for Arcane Rush. If you're looking to dominate the boards with relentless aggression, sacrifice mechanics, and overwhelming power, you're in the right place. In this guide, we break down exactly how the faction works, how the cards interact with each other, and how to get the absolute maximum value out of your deck. So, let's not wait any longer and dive straight into it. Okay, quick heads up. Before we start the guide, I won't be talking about heroes today. Heroes are very strong, heroes can help you a lot, but today I'm only talking about the cards and the faction itself. But let me tell you this, Aztec heroes are very strong, so in many cases you can use them. Okay, let's start with unique mechanics. Aztecs, like any of the other factions in the game, have very interesting mechanics. For Aztecs, those that I'm telling you now are even unique, so keep them in mind. They have ritual, sacrifice, offering spells, and blessing spells. Let's talk about sacrifice first. Sacrifice is a mechanic where you, in essence, delete a unit from the shop or from your board, and then something happens. Okay, ritual. Ritual is something that is combined with sacrifice. I told you that sacrifice, when you sacrifice a unit, something happens. In many cases, something happens when you actively use a card to sacrifice a card, then the effect of that card will trigger. But if you have ritual cards on your board, they can also trigger because ritual is an effect that it's like a countdown. So like for example, if you have a card with ritual 3 on the board, then every single time you sacrifice a unit from the shop or from your board, it doesn't matter, though this counter will count down to 2, to 1, and then it will trigger. This is very interesting because they're very, very strong ritual cards in the game. I will come to them later on. Another interesting fact is rituals will also count down at the start of each turn. So when you fight and then you come into the shop again, ritual will also count down 1 for every single unit that has this ritual effect. So they have not the same counter, but every single card has a different counter that will separate counter down. Something like this. It's kind of hard to explain, but I think you get the gist of it. Ritual is very strong. Okay, what else? What is offering spells? Offering spells is something also very interesting because you get this offering spell in your hand, and then you can play it to actively reduce a unit's ritual by 1. That's what offering spell says. So if you have ritual spells in your hand, you can actively trigger rituals on the board. The last thing is blessing spells. And right now there are only 2 ways to get blessing spells. The only one way is through a tier 3 unit that will, when you sacrifice an ally, give you a blessing spell. And another way is through a relic, a tier 5 relic that is currently in the game that says every single time you sell a unit, you get a blessing spell. But it can only trigger up to 4 times in this game. So that's, well, one way to get blessing spells. In the future, there will be other other cards as well that can give you blessing spells, and there will also be different relics that can do a similar thing. But what is this blessing spell? What does it even do? Blessing spell is like a specific keyword that you can put on a unit that you want. Keep in mind, you can only put blessing spells on Aztecs. It only works with Aztecs. No other faction can get blessing spells. Another interesting fact is when you keep a blessing spell in hand, every single start of turn, that spell will change into another keyword. So for example, if you have the barrier blessing spell in hand and then you fight, start of next turn it will transform. It can become multi-strike, it can become overwhelm, it can become stealth or whatever. There are many different keywords that a blessing spell can transform into. So if you want to put specific spells on specific units, you can wait, keep them in hand, and use them later on. Very, very nice. Okay, let's talk about some specific cards that can help you sacrifice units in the shop or on the board. Let's start with self-sacrifice. There are 2 units in the game that can self-sacrifice themselves. Most of them are on play, like for example the epic or the legendary spear thrower that says on play, sacrifice me and get a coin. Then there is the drummer, the tier 3 unit. That one says on play, sacrifice me and get an Aztec. Interesting fact, the epic version of him also works in shop. So if you have, for example, if you have an offering spell, you can put that offering spell on that tier 3 drummer in shop, and then he will self-sacrifice himself in the shop, which would still trigger ritual abilities. Very interesting interaction. Maybe keep that in mind if you don't have the legendary version. In most cases, the legendary version is better though, so if you have him, equip him. Now let's talk about other cards that can sacrifice on play. There are 4 different cards that can do this. The first is the tier 3, then there is the tier 2, one tier 4, and there is the Guardian. Let's talk about the tier 3 first. The tier 3 is very interesting because he is, the legendary version at least, is the only card that can actively give you blessing spells. If you sacrifice an ally, he doesn't trigger when you sacrifice a unit in shop. You can do that, but then you won't get the blessing spell. So in some cases, it's better to sacrifice the unit in shop because you don't want to sacrifice anything on the board, but then you don't get the blessing spell, but keep that in mind. The epic version of him works the same way, but he won't give you a blessing spell, but a random keyword on a random unit on the board. So he is like a worse version of the legendary one. Then there is this tier 2 unit. There are 2 kinds of tier 2 units. The first legendary one says, well, I've shown you 2 legendary versions, but the epic version also works. Let's talk about the legendary versions though, because they are more interesting in my opinion. The first legendary says sacrifice a unit and get an Aztec of that same tier, which says if you sacrifice a tier 3 unit in shop or on the board, then you will get another tier 3 unit. Keep in mind, you will always get Aztecs, and the unit you sacrifice, if that, for example, is an Aztec, you cannot get the same Aztec. You will always get another one. So, for example, if you sacrifice a tier 5 Aztec, you will get another tier 5 Aztec that is not the same. The second card, the second tier 2, will sacrifice one unit and then steal a unit from shop. Also interesting if you want a specific card from shop. In most cases, I like the one that actually gives you a unit of that same tier more, because you can control more on what you get. You can fish for the cards that you are searching for to build your build. Then there is the tier 4. He is very interesting because he will, when you sacrifice a unit, transfer those stats to another unit, and when he is golden, he will transfer double the stats to another unit. There are many interactions, many situations where he is useful. You can also use him in other factions, like for example for demons or for dwarves, where you sacrifice a specific dwarf with 10k, like the Bruce Lee for example, and then you will transfer all those stats to another unit. He is very nice, he works with Aztecs, but he also works with other strategies. The last one is the Kukulkan, the Guardian. He is one of the few Guardians in the game, and I will come to him later again, but he is very interesting because he has a death ability, so you want to keep him on the board in many cases. He, like any of the other cards I mentioned, sacrifices a unit, like in shop or on the board. But that's very interesting. He is the only card that can actively interact with the sacrificed units that I'm talking about today. He can, when he dies, spawn the strongest unit that you sacrifice this game. If he is golden, he will summon the 2 strongest units you sacrifice this game. But keep in mind, they will be cursed, so you cannot sacrifice a 100k unit and then it will spawn with 100k. It will still be the same unit, but it will be cursed, so the moment it attacks, it will instantly kill itself as well. Let's talk about some cards that sacrifice under specific circumstances now. Those are some very important cards because they can interact with other cards very efficiently. Let's talk about the Tidebender first. In my opinion, he's one of the most important cards to play Aztecs, well, efficiently, obviously. What does the Tidebender do though? Well, it's simple. He says start of turn, you get 2 offering spells. We talked about offering spells before. Offering spells are very nice because they can actively reduce rituals on the board, right? Very nice. Okay. Another effect is on ritual 3, sacrifice a unit in the shop. 2 left. When he is golden, he will have 4 left, so you can sacrifice up to 4 units in shop every single turn. That is very nice. Why do we want that though? Well, the reason is simple, because we want to sacrifice as many units as possible. And every single time we sacrifice a unit, all the rituals on the board will get reduced by 1, which is very nice. By the way, it will also reduce its own counter, so it will be ritual 2 when it sacrifices unit in shop. Let's talk about the Playdate Oracle next. The Playdate Oracle is a new card that was introduced, I think, in the last season. This is a very important card for if you don't have the Tidebender, because this one says, start of turn, sacrifice the unit to my right and summon a plain copy of it. When it's golden, it will do this effect twice. So it will 2 times sacrifice the unit to the right and summon a plain copy of it. Keep in mind, you will lose all the stats of the unit to the right, but in many cases you find units that you can sacrifice, so it's not that hard. It's not a big problem. You can also play 2 Playdate Oracles next to each other, and then the first one will sacrifice the one to the right, and it will come back, and then that one will trigger. So if you can even play 2 in a row without any problems, they still trigger. Why do we want that though? Well, like I said earlier, we want to sacrifice, and and this one is even a sacrifice on the board, which is very interesting. We can come back to that later. We want to trigger sacrifice, we want to trigger rituals, we want to do a lot of that shenanigans. Okay, so the Oracle is very nice to trigger rituals every single turn. It's a free way to trigger rituals. You don't need to buy any other units in the shop to play them or anything else. You can just leave it on the board and it will do its job every single turn. Then there is the Primordial. The Primordial is, in my opinion, one of the most important cards that you have to play if you want to, well, play Aztecs efficiently, especially with a dog comp. I will come back to that one later as well. The Primordial has 2 effects if it's legendary. The epic one also works, by the way, but the legendary is way stronger. The legendary says when it has ritual 1, so every single time a unit gets sacrificed, this one will trigger. It will give 5/5 to the front row, and it will give, I think, 2/2 to the shop as well, which is very nice. Because if you can give 2/2 to the shop, every single unit in the shop will from then on have more stats than before. That is very nice because we can, well, interact with the shop, with the dog, for example. I will come back to that one later though. So you can scale the shop, you can scale the front row. That is very nice. The second effect is an ongoing effect. That one says, when I see a ritual reduced by 10, or 10 times a ritual is reduced on the board, then sacrifice all units in the current shop. This is 1 left. When it's legendary, it's 2 left, and the scaling of that card doubles. So always make that one golden if possible. Primordial Exorcist is very nice because, well, it is even more sacrifices on top of the sacrifices that already happen. So every 10 reduced rituals, it will trigger up to 3 more rituals because it will sacrifice up to 3 units in shop. Very nice. Oh, by the way, it will also trigger its ritual effect 3 more times when that happens. So it will give all the units in shop 6/6 and all the front row units 5/5. Plus times 3, so 15/15. Primordial Exorcist is very nice because this is the main card to scale with in the game, in my opinion. Then there is the Flexing. I don't know how to pronounce this name, but I call him Flexer now. Is the one with the frisbee. That is a tier 4 unit that was introduced with the Primordial as well, and he is interesting, but in my opinion not necessary. You don't need him, but if you have him, he is nice to have. He says ongoing, when an ally is sacrificed, give units in the shop for this game, and sacrifice all units in the current shop. He sounds stronger than the Primordial, because it is no limit. It will always sacrifice all the units in shop, and the scaling in shop is better. But there is one big problem with it. It's an ally that has to be sacrificed, so it only really works in combination with the Oracle, for example, that is in the front row middle, like the second position, or with all the cards that I showed you before, that self-sacrifice, for example, or you have to actively sacrifice a unit on the board, and in many cases you don't want that, so he is heavily limited on how many you can sacrifice. And he will instantly trigger as well. So while the other one will trigger when it sees 10 rituals reduced. So there's a kind of happening that happens one after another, and he will always be the first that triggers whenever a unit, an ally is sacrificed. Okay, he's nice. He can also scale, so you can play him if you want to. If you find ways to use him, he is also very nice. You can use him instead of the Primordial Exorcist, but in most cases I like the Primordial Exorcist more. So if you can even use them together if you want to. But then in some cases you won't be able to control the sacrifices in shop, and sometimes you sacrifice too much in shop. So and before the shop refreshes, for example, and then you just have free triggers that happen, and you cannot do anything about it. You cannot you cannot min-max the sacrifices that way sometimes. The next one is the what is that one called? Primordial is it Vengeance? No, it's the one to the left. Primordial Unity. Primordial Unity is a card that says ongoing. The first unit you play each turn is sacrificed, and you gain the stats of that sacrificed card and a random keyword. That one is interesting if you don't have the Primordial Exorcist. So it's just another way to play them. But then you actually need the flexing. Those two in combination are very important, because without the flexing, the sacrifice chain doesn't really happen. So you need the flexing, and you need the Oracle and the Time Bender, and you need the dog. Well, I'll come back to that later. But that is an alternative way to play them, and I guess you have to try how it works for you. I have the rest of the cards, so I don't play that strategy, but best of luck on that. Then there is, I've shown you the Plunging Sun Spear now, but there are multiple cards that can sacrifice as well, like the epic one that says after 2 turns, but the rare one. The epic one that says start of turn, sacrifice a unit in the shop. He doesn't really do much itself. He just triggers start of turn every single turn. There is also a legendary variant that says after you play 2 Aztecs, sacrifice a unit in the shop. It's a legendary version. And there is also the legendary one that says sacrifice a unit in the shop. Your next refresh costs 1 less. This is also a start of turn trigger, so it's just an upgrade to the epic version. Those are interesting because you can, keep on sacrificing, but in most cases I strongly advise you to use 2 of the other cards that I will come to later. Now, let's talk about cards that profit from sacrifices. I told you I will talk about the Warden or the Sun Spear a little bit later, but now is the time. Bottom right, you can see him. He is the Sun Spear Warden. That one says ongoing. When an ally is sacrificed, get a Guardian. He is one of the few cards that can actually give you a Guardian. I will come back to the Guardian thingy later though, so all good. Another interesting card is the Altar, top left on first position. There is the epic version that says Ritual 5, get a Guardian, but there's also the legendary version that says Ritual 7, discover a Guardian, 2 left. The other one has 1 left. And there is the Sunblessed Altar that also says to play, and Ritual 5, discover an Aztec. He will discover an Aztec, not a Guardian. It's the same slot card though, so keep that in mind. He is very nice because he profits from rituals. He will give you units, depending on which one you have equipped. Then there is the Ruler. I have shown you the Starbound Ruler because I believe the Starbound Ruler is the best one you can equip if you have him. He says when a unit is sacrificed, give me its stats. So every single time a unit is sacrificed, the units in shop also count. He will get the stats of this, sacrificed unit very, very nice. But the others have similar effects, like the Epic version says on Kickstart, give me 7/7 for each unit sacrificed this game. So he will scale with the amount of sacrifices. Then there is the Bloodthirsty ruler that says ongoing, when a unit is sacrificed, give me 3/3 for each unit you sacrifice this game. He will also scale with each sacrifice that happens in the game while he is on the board. Then there is the Supreme Ruler that says Kickstart, gain half the stats of the last different unit you sacrificed permanently. He will also get stats of a sacrificed unit, but he works best if you sacrifice a big stat unit as the last unit before you, well, fight. Because then he will get the stats permanently as well. Or half the stats. If he's legendary golden, if he's golden, then he will get all the stats. Then there is Crimson Tonali. Crimson Tonali is another newly introduced card into the game that came with, I think, Fire and Blood, what it's called. That was the event. I call it event. Crimson Tonali is very interesting because she will, on Kickstart, give all your units 10/10 for every single unit you sacrifice this game. So if you sacrificed, let's say, 20 units, she will give all your units on the board 20/20. She works with other factions as well. For example, if you play like a neutral card on the board, Crimson Tonali will still on Kickstart give this neutral unit the stats that Crimson Tonali gives every single card. On death, she will give an enemy Blood Bond. Blood Bond is another very interesting interaction that only Aztecs have. Blood Bond says, damage I take is also dealt to another ally with Blood Bond. So if you have multiple enemies with Blood Bond and one of them takes damage, the other one will also take the same amount of damage. That is very, very strong because you can chain the damage between different cards, different enemy units. When Crimson Tonali is golden, she will give double the amount of stats for every single sacrifice, and she will give 2 enemies Blood Bond on death. So golden Crimson Tonali actually does a lot for you. Then there is the Primordial Exorcist again. I talked about her before, but she also profits from sacrifices because, well, she has a ritual one. She will always give stats to the front row and she will always give stats into the shop. So you want to, well, scale with her a lot. So every single sacrifice benefits the scaling. The last one I want to talk about is the dog, the Guardian. He is one of the few Guardians in the game, and he is very, very strong. Because let's talk about the golden version first, because if you can manage to make him golden, always do that. He says Ritual 2, so it will, well, get reduced every single time a sacrifice happens. Absorb the units in the shop and refresh it. What that means is all the units in the shop will get stats via the Primordial, for example, or the flexing, the Frisbee guy, the tier 4, and then he will, well, he will absorb all those stats into himself. But that also means he will get the keywords and he will get, well, everything the card has except the effects of those cards. So the Guardian can actually get very, very big if you can manage to scale the shop a lot. On attack, he has another ability that says, attack, give 2 enemies Blood Bond, then deal half my damage to them. This means before he even attacks, before he even does damage to the enemy, he will put Blood Bond on 2 units and then deal damage to both of them, which is crazy because, well, if they are Blood Bonded, they will also damage the other Blood Bonded card as well. So they will get the full amount of damage, and then the Guardian is allowed to attack. If he has multi-strike, this attack ability will trigger multiple times, like twice. And this is crazy because you can do a lot of damage with him. He's one of the strongest cards in the game, in my opinion, right now. Okay, let's talk briefly about specific cards that can support your comp in different stages of the game. I'll start with Crimson Tonali first. As I explained her before, you can always slot her in as the last unit on the board, and she will always help you because she will always give you stats. She's always a taunt unit, and she will always blood bond 1 enemy when she dies, at least. So she is always good to play, she's always nice even for the end board. Whenever you have her and you have space for her and you have the gold for her, you can play her. She is always okay to use. Let's talk about the Slamming Shalshi next. The Slamming Shalshi is a legendary version of Shalshi, and I believe she is a very, very nice card that if you have her, you should equip her. She says ongoing, when a ritual is triggered, trigger it again. 3 left. This one is very nice because it will trigger all the rituals that happen on the board one more time. It's very nice because, for example, if you trigger the dog and he will absorb the shop and refresh the shop, this effect will trigger one more time, so he will absorb again and refresh the shop again. This is very nice because the dog can get double the amount of stats for at least 3 instances. Then there is the primordial, when the ritual one is triggered and the shop units get buffed and the board get buffed and the front row gets buffed, it will also trigger again. Same thing with the Tidebender. If you trigger the Tidebender effect, this Tidebender effect will trigger again. So you sacrifice 2 units in shop, one after another. Also, very nice. When the Slamming Shalshi is golden, she will also do the same thing but twice. So when a ritual is reduced, trigger it again twice, but still 3 left. So when, for example, the doggo swallows the shop and refreshes it, this effect will trigger 3 times in a row before anything else happens. So the Slamming Shalshi is helpful for scaling, for ritual triggering, for consistency, for scaling in the shop as well, via the Primordial, for example. So the Slamming Shalshi is always nice, but she's also one of the first units you sell when you don't have any space, but you need that space for something else, for example. Because the rituals are, well, no, the effect is limited to 3 times per turn, and sometimes you find another one, for example, then you can trigger her again, or you want to find another, you play another Tidebender on that same spot, like, and then you can trigger the Tidebender effect if you have enough blessing spells or sacrifice units left. So Slamming Charge is always nice to have, but she is only a support unit for when you already have your board, your setup built, and then only for a couple of turns here and there. Then there is the Soaring Soldier. I think the Soaring Soldier is the only soldier that is interesting to use, but I've put the Swinging Soldier in this guide as well because he might help you as well in the phases where you need to find specific units, and he will get you an Aztec. The Soaring Soldier is nice because he will give you an Aztec on play. So it's very, well, efficient. You can just play it and sell it instantly again, so you have space for another card. While the Swinging Soldier has to remain on the board because you have to trigger his ritual effects first before he has any value for you. Then there is this tier 2 unit in the top right. That one is interesting because it will help you in the early game. Like if you have ritual units in the early game already, like there is this tier 1 bird, for example, or there is this tier 2 spear guy that can, well, work with blood bond. They have ritual abilities, and every start of turn, the ritual will be reduced. And if that ritual effect is triggered, all the units on the board will get +2/+2. So this is a stat unit that can help you in the early game. If you can slot her, it's nice. In some cases you use her, in some cases you don't, but if you have her, it's always nice to have. Then as the last one, I introduced the final form Sage. He's interesting because he is a ritual 2 unit and will give all allies a random keyword once left. So you can only trigger that effect once. If he's golden, you can trigger that effect twice. But the interesting part is that, for example, if you don't have all the keywords you want on your dog in your last turn, you can trigger this guy and he will give one more keyword to your dog and to the rest of the board as well. And sometimes this can actually help you find the keyword you want. So he is nice to fish for specific keywords, but for most of the game, he is not really interesting at all. Let's talk about Guardians and how to get them now. Very important if you want to play Guardians, there are only 2 different cards in the game that can get or discover you Guardians. So when you want to play with Guardians, you have to equip them under any circumstances. Those are very important. The first one is a tier 4 unit, the second one is a tier 5 unit. The tier 4 unit, I think I have shown him briefly before, is the Sunspear Warden or the Sunspear Guardian. The Sunspear Warden is a unit that will give you a Guardian every single time, every single turn once when an ally is sacrificed. When he is golden, he has this effect twice, so you can technically sacrifice 2 allies each turn to get a Guardian. Important to note is you will only get a Guardian, so which Guardian you get is completely random. The second one is the Sunspear Guardian. He will on play get you a Guardian. I like him more because he doesn't clog up the board, he has no space problem, because the Sunspear Warden has the problem you have to play him and he has to remain on the board and then you have to sacrifice an ally. So sometimes you have space problems with him. So I like the play get a Guardian more, even though you can only trigger him once, while you can trigger the other one through multiple turns. Then there is the altar. There are 3 different altars that you can use, but I strongly advise you to use one of the legendary versions because the epic version will on Ritual 5 get you a Guardian. So sadly, you cannot discover. Discover is very nice though, because if you can discover a Guardian, like with the Altar of Divinity or the Altar of whatever it's called, these two will, when they trigger, like the first one will trigger on play, will give you an option of 3 different guardians that you can choose from, and then you can choose the guardian you want to use. In many cases, you want to use the dog if you want to play with the dog strategy. Sometimes you also want to use the bird, sometimes you want to use the Kukulkan to sacrifice another unit, and sometimes you want to use that tiger just to get more stats on the end board if you want to. In many cases, I don't use him, but he also has his uses, so never underestimate him. I do like the playability, discover a guardian the most, because like with the Sunspear, he isn't a problem with space. But sometimes the other one is also interesting, especially because there's one specific card that can help you trigger rituals way more frequently and way faster than um, the normal way. I will come to him later on. So both of the altars are very nice to get your guardians. Let's talk about guardians now. I've talked about the dog before. I've talked about the Kukulkan in I think so. And then there is only the tiger, and then there is the birds. Let's start with the tiger. The tiger is very interesting because he will on kickstart gain the same amount of attack stats than your strongest ally. So when your dog, for example, has 20k attack, he will also gain 20k attack. The problem with him, he will not have any HP at all. But when he dies, he will transfer those attack stats randomly across the board. So all your units will have more attack stats. This is also very nice. The last one is the bird, and I think the bird is one of the, stronger guardians, because the bird will on kickstart get, half of the stats of every single unit that you sacrifice this game. So when you sacrifice 20 units in shop, the bird will get half of all those 20 sacrificed units in the shop throughout the whole game. I've played with him and then he on kickstart got like 15k attack and HP. So he is a beefy unit when he is allowed to kickstart. He is very nice for your end game boards. Okay, let's talk briefly about specific cards that can support your comp in different stages of the game. I'll start with Crimson Tonali first. As I explained her before, you can always slot her in as the last unit on the board, and she will always help you because she will always give you stats. She's always a taunt unit, and she will always bloodbond one enemy when she dies, at least. So she is always good to play, she's always nice, even for the end board. Whenever you have her, and you have space for her, and you have the gold for her, you can play her. She is always okay to use. Let's talk about the Slamming Shalshi next. The Slamming Shalshi is a legendary version of Shalshi, and I believe she is a very, very nice card that if you have her, you should equip her. She says ongoing, when a ritual is triggered, trigger it again. 3 left. This one is very nice because it will trigger all the rituals that happen on the board one more time. It's very nice because, for example, if you trigger the dog and he will absorb the shop and refresh the shop, this effect will trigger one more time. So he will absorb again and refresh the shop again. This is very nice because the dog can get double the amount of stats for at least 3 instances. Then there is the primordial, when the ritual one is triggered and the shop units get buffed and the board get buffed and the front row gets buffed, it will also trigger again. Same thing with the Tidebender. If you trigger the Tidebender effect, this Tidebender effect will trigger again. So you sacrifice 2 units in shop, one after another. Also, very nice. When the Slamming Shalshi is golden, she will also do the same thing but twice. So when a ritual is reduced, trigger it again twice, but still 3 left. So when, for example, the doggo swallows the shop and refreshes it, this effect will trigger 3 times in a row before anything else happens. So the Slamming Shalshi is helpful for scaling, for ritual triggering, for consistency, for scaling in the shop as well, via the Primordial, for example. So the Slamming Shalshi is always nice, but she's also one of the first units you sell when you don't have any space, but you need that space for something else, for example. Because the rituals are, well, no, the effect is limited to 3 times per turn, and sometimes you find another one, for example, then you can trigger her again, or you want to find another, you play another Tidebender on that same spot, and then you can trigger the Tidebender effect if you have enough blessing spells or sacrifice units left. So Slamming Charge is always nice to have, but she is only a support unit for when you already have your board, your setup built, and then only for a couple of turns here and there. Then there is the Soaring Soldier. I think the Soaring Soldier is the only soldier that is interesting to use, but I've put the Swinging Soldier in this guide as well because he might help you as well um, in the phases where you need to find specific units, and he will get you an Aztec. The Soaring Soldier is nice because he will give you an Aztec on play. So it's very, well, efficient. You can just play it and sell it instantly again, so you have space for another card. While the Swinging Soldier has to remain on the board because you have to trigger his ritual effects first before he has any value for you. Then there is this tier 2 unit in the top right. That one is interesting because it will help you in the early game. Like if you have ritual units in the early game already, like there is this tier 1 bird, for example, or there is this tier 2 spear guy that can, well, work with blood bond. They have ritual abilities, and every start of turn, the ritual will be reduced. And if that ritual effect is triggered, all the units on the board will get +2/+2. So this is a stat unit that can help you in the early game. If you can slot her, it's nice. In some cases you use her, in some cases you don't, but if you have her, it's always nice to have. And then as the last one, I introduced the final form Sage. He's interesting because he is a ritual 2 unit and will give all allies a random keyword once left. So you can only trigger that effect once. If he's golden, you can trigger that effect twice. But the interesting part is that, for example, if you don't have all the keywords you want on your dog in your last turn, you can trigger this guy and he will give one more keyword to your dog and to the rest of the board as well. And sometimes this can actually help you find the keyword you want. So he is nice to fish for specific keywords, but for most of the game, he is not really interesting at all. Before we come to the end game boards, let's talk about keywords for the doggo first. There are 2 ways to get keywords on your doggo. The first one is through, well, the blessing spells. The other one is through the doggo itself and through the unit in the shop, because the doggo, he will, well, he will absorb all the units with all the stats and keywords that are in the shop. So when you have like taunt units, multi-strike units, overwhelm units in the shop, or even barrier or ranged units in the shop, he will get those keywords as well when he absorbs them. There is one bad part though, because undead have this cursed keyword, which will also apply to the dog. So the moment the dog attacks, he will kill himself. So in most cases, it's not good to play Aztecs in combination with undead because this cursed is a problem for the dog. You can still play it, but it's not ideal. Finally, endboards. Let's talk endboard setups. As I showed you before, there are some very interesting interactions, and in my opinion, the dog is one of the strongest units. So I will introduce only two endboards, including the dog, but there are more. Like in the intro shown, there is this one very big board for the ruler, for example. So you can play them in different kinds of ways. So, but today I will only talk about the dog setups. So let's start. The dog has this Ritual 2 ability that will absorb all the units and then refresh the shop. Then we have the Primordial Exorcist. I always like to play two. If you have two, if you can make them golden, it's even better. Um, they will scale the shop, scale the front row, so it will scale the dog and themselves if you place it like this, but you can also place a tight bender like that if you want to. It doesn't really matter that much. And then they will, well, if the ritual is reduced enough, then they will sacrifice all the units in shop. Very nice. Then there is this Tidebender, and this is where the first, well, difference occurs in the two setups that I'm showing you right now. The first one is that you use the Tidebender. The second one is the Playdate Oracle. Let's talk about the Tidebender first, though. I only placed one Tidebender on position 4, but there is also a second Tidebender on position 5, which is a unit you can place there if you have the space for it, and if you can, well, manage to leave that one on the board. The Tidebender is very nice because he will give you, well, enough offering spells so that you can trigger the Tidebender itself at least once. So it has a similar effect in the Playdate Oracle. The one problem is the Playdate Oracle will sacrifice an ally to the right, while the Tidebender will sacrifice a unit in the shop. But, and that's very interesting, when the Tidebender triggers and then the Guardian resets the shop, and the primordial sees, oh, it's enough sacrifices that happened, enough rituals were reduced, then I will sacrifice the shop again. Then the guardian will, well, reduce the ritual first, and then the first primordial will reduce and then the second primordial will reduce, and then the tidebender will reduce, and then the guardian will reduce again, because this is the sequence and how the ritual reduces happen. So always keep the sequence in mind on how they trigger. Sometimes it's even better to place the Guardian behind the Primordials, because then the Primordials can scale the shop first before the Guardians, well, swallows or absorbs the shop to get the most amount of stats out of it. So, and then the Tidebender can technically trigger a second time. The other nice reason why the Tidebender is good is because the offering spell, you can use those on, well, Primordial themselves, or you can use it on the Guardian as well to actively decide which keywords to swallow, for example, or if you want to reset the shop without using a coin. So this is very nice. Um, then there is position 5 and position 6. Position 5 and 6 are always slots that, well, can be filled with other cards, but it depends and it changes with the game state and the cards that you find. I placed the Slamming Chalchi on P5, I placed the Altar on P5, I placed another Tidebender on P5. If you can make the Tidebender golden, it's even better. But those are cards that you can place in P5. You can also place them on P6, that there is no reason not to. But in some cases, you can also place the Tonali on P6, and you can also place this, well, this drummer on P6 as well. The interesting part about the drummer is he will, if you leave him on the board, because he is he is ritual 1, on start of turn, reduce his own ritual, which will sacrifice himself, which is an ally sacrifice. So you can also play it with the Playdate Oracle, for example, which is very interesting because you trigger one more sacrifice, which is even a sacrifice of your ally. So you can also combine it with the Sunspear Warden, for example. So that one is interesting in that interaction. But well, the combination of cards that you play on P5 and P6 differ on which cards you have, which cards you want to play, if you want to discover more guardians, if you want to trigger more sacrifices, whatever, right? Whatever you want to go with, you can use on that. The same thing also works with your other board, with the Bladed Oracle, but for that you have to keep in mind when a unit is sacrificed, all the counters and all the things that happened, all the stats are reset when it's summoned again, because it summons a plain copy and not the unit itself. So for example, if you have an altar of divinity, or sorry, an altar of Quetzal, I don't know what it's called, next to the Bladed Oracle, the rituals that happened already on that altar will reset again. Same thing with the Sunspear Warden. It will not trigger because the Sunspear Warden will get sacrificed itself. But it still works as long as you don't sacrifice a unit that you actually want to keep the stats on, and as long as you don't sacrifice golden units, because then it will be a plain copy again. It's all good. You can sacrifice with the Bladed Oracle whatever you want. It also works with the drummer, of course, because the drummer will trigger after the Bladed Oracle. The ritual reduce will trigger after the Bladed Oracle. That's also very nice to keep in mind. Okay, these are some of the, well, boards that I like to play with. I in most cases I use the left one because I don't have the Bladed Oracle. But if you have the Bladed Oracle, you could play the other way as well. And you can try out what works for you best, and keep going from there. Wonderful. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to my guide. I really hope you find it helpful and have a blast leading your new faction to victory. Up next, we are diving straight into an Aztec run, so get ready for an epic journey filled with all the ideas that I talked about in this strategy. Have fun, enjoy the gameplay, and best of luck in the future.
digital, I'm gliding. Organic plates, salmon over quinoa. Keep it authentic, everything you see raw. In the morning with the stretch, I be counting blessings. $250,000 on the dresser, no more stressing. Matcha in my cup, and I don't do no capping. I talk health and wealth and moves that make it happen. Vintage Gucci apron, flipping duck confit. She texted me a poem, she said my aura calm just like the sea. Big body, back flipping in the sauna. Chef with the wrist, I make souffle out in Tijuana. Loops cracked like ceramic soul in the sample. Investing in land while they fighting for a Lambo. Got the savings and the flavor. I turn my life into a banger. Lemon pepper drizzle on the heirloom fish. Talking stocks while I plate up this elegant dish. Alkaline water in a cut crystal glass. Made a meal off of vibes and a little bit of class. They worry about clout while I was stacking the funds. Bought land out in Napa just to grow me some plums. Keep the circle tight like a Michelin chef. Only bread I break now comes with respect. Silk robe dragging on the marble floor. Breakfast in bed. Girl, bring me some more. Poached eggs with the truffle on the side. Mimosas flowing like a West Coast tide. I talk slick, but I move in silence. Diamonds bloody, like they study violence. Oyster blaze steak, cooked rare up in the coop. Seats made of leather, and the dreams of my youth. Vintage frames on my face, see the vision clearer. Manifest in peace, no hate up in the mirror. I ain't rushing nothing, I smell the rose petals. Keep the mindset steady and go harder than some metal. Moonlight on the dash, got the world in my palm. Every move like a breeze, every word like a psalm. Ain't no rush on the road, when the timing is right. Let the beat fade slow, then I'm gone with the night.